Okay, this is going to be your Unit 4 test review, and just let me say that everything in this review will be on the test, and I did my best not to go over anything. I did my best not to cover concepts that won't be on the test. Okay, so this review, what I'm saying is this review will not be a waste of your time. Okay. First, we're going to look at these triangles, and we're actually just looking at any kind of polygon and deciding if they're going to be congruent or not. And if we look at this, one of the things that you always look at, it looks kind of obvious that the triangles are congruent, but you make sure that their vertices match up and that they correspond. So there's A and F, and here's B and E, and then here's C and D. So yes, this is true. Those are congruent. So we look here and we say, okay, A corresponds with F, and they're saying right here that it should correspond with D. So I don't have to go any further. I know that's a false because it's the incorrect correspondence. They didn't write out the name of the triangles correctly is what they're saying. I don't know how to spell correspondence all of a sudden. I was doing it correctly. It's just a long word. Okay. Well, I can't find my pointer. Alright, are these going to be congruent? So you look at how they've written out the names. So G corresponds with N, H corresponds with M, I corresponds with L, J corresponds with K, so that's true. Well, there we go. Alright, let's look at this one. We're looking, I should correspond with L. That's alright. J should correspond with K. That's correct. G should correspond with N. And then H correspond with M. And that is true as well. See, those are pretty simple. You just got to sit there and make sure all the letters are written in the right order. Okay, let's look here. Now this one could be tricky because they rotated it. T corresponds with, it looks like they've got it corresponding with Q to where it should be with P. And U should be with P, and they're saying U is with Q. So I'm not going to go any further. I'm going to say false, and again, it's an incorrect correspondence. Spondence. See, I tell you, that word's too long. I ran out of space to write it. Okay, now let's look here. They say V should go with O. That's true. U should go with P. U, P. And then T with Q. T and Q. And I bet we're going to be alright. S with R. There we go. So that one's true. Okay, in these it says determine whether the triangles are congruent, and if so, choose the postulate that proves they are congruent. Well, if you look at this one right here, you've got CB and BA. Those are sides. Okay. Then we've got CD is congruent to DA. That's another side. And then we know that DB is congruent to DB based on the reflexive property, so that's another side. So these guys are going to be congruent by side, side, side. On this one, we've got a side, an angle, and a side. And that works right there. Choice B. On this one, let me see what we got here. We got angle, side, angle. I'm making sure everybody corresponds. and they do. So it's going to be angle, side, angle. ASA. I keep losing my pointer. There we go. Okay, and on this one's kind of tricky. They tell you right here that the triangles are congruent. They also state that they're parallel. Okay, so remember, whenever you have parallel lines or parallel segments, you can extend the lines to get the full picture. I keep saying lines, it should be segments. Okay, so that's giving you a full picture of what everybody looks like. Now the reason I want you to see that is because if lines are parallel, that means they have equal distances between them. So I know I have this angle right here. Okay, I also know that CF is going to be congruent to EB, and I know DE is going to be congruent to FA. Had to find a place to write those lines. So what I've got is a side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. Okay, that was kind of tricky. So if you ever look and you feel like they're not giving you enough information, but you know some segments are parallel, go ahead and extend them. And remember, there's equal distance between parallel lines, so that's how I knew all those guys were the same length. Okay, do we have enough information to prove the triangle's congruent? And if so, state the congruence postulate you would use. Well, we know we've got a side here. We've got sides there. But what you might not see is that you've got that side. Remember, AC is congruent to AC based on the reflexive property. So the answer here is yes. We can prove them congruent by the side, side, side. Alright, let's look at this one. I've got angle, side, side. And doesn't look like I'm going to be able to prove anything because we've learned that if you write it like that, it's not going to work. All you got to do is read it backwards and know, ooh, no, 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 no. It's not going to work. No. And triangles, these triangles, they can't be proven by SSS, SAS, or angle, side, angle, ASA. Alright, so it's not going to work. We can't prove them congruent. Okay, let's look at this one. We've got this angle's congruent to this angle. This side's congruent to this side. Don't ever forget this one in the middle. There we go. That's another side. Now this one goes side, angle, side. So that's a yes. Alright, what postulate or theorem can be used to prove that triangle ABD is congruent to ACE? I've got to look at this. ABD, ABD is congruent to ACE. Alright, I see where my triangles are now. Okay, well they both have this angle. They both have this side. Let's separate these guys. Oh my goodness, bad triangle. But you're going to get the idea. And this is D, this is B. Okay, this is point E right here. This is C and this is A. So if we're looking, we know these angles are congruent. We know these sides are congruent. And what else do we know? We know that that this angle right here is congruent on both of them. So I'm trying to figure out something. Okay, I'm going to go with on this one that it's angle side angle, because here I have an angle, right here I have an angle, there I have a side, there I have an angle. So it's ASA. So, and that's what I'm going to like. Okay. Here they says, in what additional information will prove that triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD by the hypotenuse leg theorem? So we can tell that if it was a right angle, we know that the hypotenuses are congruent, and we need to know that AD is congruent to DC, but that's not a choice. But we also were not positive that that's a right angle. So in order to be able to solve it, because see, I know that this leg right here is congruent to this leg by the reflexive property. So what I still need to know for sure is that it is a right angle, because they didn't give me a little box telling me that. Okay, what do I need to prove? And they're saying BD bisects angle ADC, so that means that angle is congruent to that angle. It says it also bisects ABC, so I know those guys are congruent. I also know that these two guys, or that line in the middle, is going to be congruent to itself by the reflexive property, so I can use the angle side angle theorem to prove that they are congruent. Now this wants to know what is the measure of SR. Well, remember, if I know the converse of the isosceles theorem says that the angles opposite the congruent sides are congruent. So the converse is going to say that the sides opposite congruent angles are congruent. So that's going to tell me that SQ is congruent to SR. So I got SR is congruent to SQ, which means it equals 1.75 centimeters. And remember, we proved that by using the converse of the isosceles triangle theorem. Okay, it says if the measure of x is 40 degrees, what's the measure of angle y? Well, in this one, it is the isosceles triangle theorem, which tells me that angles opposite congruent sides are congruent, so that means angle W is congruent to angle Y. When I have an isosceles triangle, I know that the measure of angle X plus the measure of angle W plus the measure of angle Y is going to equal 180 degrees. So the measure of angle X is 40. And these two guys are going to be the same length. So measure of angle W plus the measure of angle Y equals 180. Well, I subtract, I'm going to call these guys X. Subtract 40 from both sides. So now I got X plus X is 2X. Divide both sides by 2. X equals 70 degrees. So the measure of angle Y equals 70 degrees. Okay, it says what is the measure, if the measure of angle J is 25, what is the measure of angle L? So J is 25, which means that K is 25. So I'm going to take 180 minus 2 times 25 will equal the measure of angle L. So that's going to be 180 minus 50. 180 minus 50 is going to give me 130 degrees is the measure of angle L. It says PR bisects angle P, so I'm going to know that these two guys right here are congruent. What do we know about angle PRN and angle PRO? Okay. Oh, they're going to be congruent as well. Let me draw a double line there, like that. Those guys are going to be congruent as well. And it says that angle PO, couldn't draw P for PRN and angle PRO equal 90 degrees. We know that because that we're dealing with an isosceles triangle, so we know that this guy is congruent to this guy. Alright, and the bisector of the vertex of an isosceles triangle is also the perpendicular bisector of the base. Okay, we've learned that in our lessons. That's going to be an easy one to forget. Thus, PR is going to be perpendicular to NO. So by the definition of perpendicular lines, we know those angles are going to be right angles and their measure is 90 degrees. Okay, we're playing with some true or false again. Is angle BAC congruent to DAC? So let's identify. Here's BAC and here's DAC. And that is going to be false, because this is a parallelogram and the diagonals of a parallelogram do not bisect opposite angles unless it's a rhombus, and we're not told that it's a rhombus. Does segment AC congruent to angle BD? So AC congruent to BD. There again, we're going to say false, because it's a parallelogram. The only way the diagonals will be congruent is if it's a rectangle or a square. Okay, and this is obviously, the figure is obviously a parallelogram. So I'm going to put only with rectangle, square, and isosceles trapezoid are the diagonals congruent. Okay, only with those figures will the diagonals be congruent. Okay, here's, we got a true or false. Is AE congruent to EC? So AE to EC. Now on that one, we can say true. And the reason is because one of the properties of a parallelogram say that the diagonals bisect each other. Okay, is AC perpendicular to BD? That's going to be false, because as far as we know, we're dealing with the basic parallelogram. Only time it is true, true is on a rhombus, a square, and a kite. Is AB congruent to CD? And that's true, because if you go back to the properties of parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent. They're also parallel. Okay, list the side lengths of triangle PQR in order from least to greatest. Angle P is 65 degrees, angle R is 35 degrees. If you add those up together, they're 100. So if I subtract 100 from 180, I get 80, so that means angle Q is 80 degrees. It says list the side lengths from least to greatest, and we know that the smallest angle is going to be opposite the smallest side. So my smallest side is going to be PQ, which is less than the size of QR, which is my middle sized segment, and it's going to be opposite the middle sized angle. And that segment's measure is less than PR, which is opposite the largest side. The largest angle. Now let's try that in reverse. They're giving us the side lengths of segments on a triangle, and they're asking us to determine the smallest angles from least to greatest. So the smallest angle is going to be opposite the smallest side, which is 7 centimeters. So you're going to have angle K, whose measure is going to be smaller than angle M, who happens to be across from the middle side segment, and his measure is going to be less than the measure of angle L, who is the largest angle, opposite the largest side. Okay, decide whether or not the given lengths could represent the sides of triangles, and as I told you in lesson 416, you've got to add up the two smallest sides and see if they are greater than the longest side, which in this example is 7. So 3 plus 5 equals 8. 8 is greater than 7. So yes, it'll make a triangle. In this one, I'm going to add up the two smallest sides, which is 4 plus 5 equals 9. 9 is not greater than 9. So no triangle. Remember that those two smallest sides have to add up to be greater than the largest side. On this one, we have 5 plus 7 equals 12. And 12 is not greater than 14, so no triangle. Now, one of the next 3 proofs is going to be on part 2 of the test. Y'all haven't been doing that great on the proofs, although I am proud of you for trying. So I thought I would help you out on this test by giving you some ideas of what it's going to be. So here is one that's given ABCD as a parallelogram and FCED as a rhombus. They want us to prove that ABCD is a rectangle. I'm not going to go through this in detail because it would make the video way too long, but I do have the reasons listed here. You could go through and pause the video as I click the reasons to see if you're going to get them correct and practice them. That is a habit of a very good student, and then you could see if you'll be able to pass it on the test. Here is reasons for the proof. A square, ABCD, diagonals AC and BD, angle DEC. You're proving that angle DEC and BEC are right angles. So you're given the statements. Well, I pushed the wrong button. So there's the reason for part B. This would be a good time to pause and work on C. Pause, work on D, and so on. Okay, and the third one is JHIJ. GHIJ is a rhombus. Prove that triangle GMJ is congruent to triangle IMJ. All right. And then one of the next three constructions will be on the part 2 of the test. Remember, you have to do the constructions by hand. You'll either take a picture of it or scan it and copy and paste it into your test when you turn it in. If you will go back and watch lesson 415, I show you each one of these videos. In the video link for lesson 415, I show you each one of these videos. You will have to do the construction by hand and explain the steps that you took to create the construction. Alright, that's the end of this Unit 4 review, and good luck on the test, and thanks for listening.